Good evening. My name is Fumio Nanjo, Senior Advisor of Mori Art Museum. We cannot discuss innovative city issues without discussing COVID-19, which is wreaking havoc all over the world. And this is the third day of the Art and Science session. We are discussing three themes. One is understanding the reality, second is empathy for others, and third is collaborative creativity. Today is the first day of the empathy for others session. With the COVID-19, globally there is significant confusion. However, it is forcing us to have new perspectives. Priorities have changed, and the importance thereof has also undergone significant change. Taking these factors into consideration, we will discuss the world, the reality, the status thereof, and the perspectives of our worldview. We cannot no longer be only human-centric. These are the topics we will be discussing today. And today, the moderator will be Ms. Asa Ito. I would like to give the microphone to Ito-san. I will be moderating today's session. I would like to, first of all, give some introductory remarks regarding this theme. As Nanjo-san has already mentioned today, we are going to have the second topic in Art and Science breakout session, which is empathy for others. And this is the first session in this theme. We will be discussing the symbiosis of human and non-humans, communicating with diverse others. With the COVID-19, based on that, we have set this theme. My impression of COVID-19 is that with the occurrence of the pandemic, the worldwide leaders discussed this in the context of war, which did not sit well for me at all. Are we truly in war with the virus? Should we be fighting the virus? That is the issue that came to my mind. By waging a war against the virus, virus is now our enemy. So there is an enemy relationship between the virus and humans. This will have an impact on human society as well. For example, people are saying that it came from China, and therefore there is discrimination against Asians, inclusive of Chinese people as well as Japanese people. And there is also criticism for people who are infected. So the relationship between the humans and virus will also have an impact on human relationships in society as well. Now, what are the biologists saying? They are saying this is not a war. I would like to refer to Fukuoka Shinichi, a biologist. He is saying that there is altruism in viruses. It means something rather shocking. However, biologically speaking, that is the case. With the COVID-19, the virus that is causing this means that on a temporary basis, Fukuoka-san is saying that they've gone outside of the human beings, and then it has come back to the human beings. That is how he is interpreting the virus. There is also the point to consider about the evolution of living organisms. The virus is playing an important role in that evolution. The genetic information in DNA is being transmitted horizontally. This is the role of the virus. When we talk about the evolution, one would think that it is vertically transmitted. However, evolution is not just vertical. It is also horizontal. DNA can be transmitted to a different species, and that is the role played by the virus, according to Fukuoka. Now, against this backdrop, the framework considered by humans are often the opposite of the actual. I read a very interesting book recently by Alice Roberts called Tamed. And what this book is saying is that human beings have tamed the animals as well as plants and engaging in agriculture. But that is not the case. It is the human beings that are being tamed by animals. By coexisting together, the animals as well as plants are evolving and human beings are evolving. So living with other species could be very stressful in our lives, but human beings have evolved to a species that can coexist with the other species. So it means that taming others will mean being tamed as well. It is occurring in many areas. As I mentioned at the outset, people are considering a virus as the enemy. That comes from the posture of controlling or guiding others. And in the modern age of human beings, that has been the prevailing posture. But the current situation besetting us today leads to the understanding that that will not suffice. We have to consider the way to coexist with others. By having said so, I'm saying that this is mutually exclusive, but it's the same as being tamed or to tame. It is not so simplistic. These two areas can be two sides of the same coin. Today, we have three panelists in this session. We will be discussing the symbiosis of human and non-human so that we can delve further into the topic of empathy for others. In the first day, the theme discussed was understanding the reality. That was a very interesting topic. So I hope that we can take that perspective as well. So where are we understanding each other? It could be in the brain, it could be in the minds. Furthermore, it could be understanding in our bodies. It could be in our mood, as well as emotions. It could be something more vague. And there is also understanding each other in our lives, in terms of life. Usually we don't think of understanding in such a wider context. But we are going to abandon human-centric thinking. That will not suffice. So let's take off the brain of humans and let's pretend to be non-humans so that we can discuss the topic of how to understand each other with empathy. We have three wonderful panelists. The first speaker will be Junji Watanabe-san. He is the Senior Distinguished Researcher of the Entity Communication Science Laboratories, Service Evolution Laboratories. He is into haptics. And the second speaker will be Professor Caroline Jones. She is the Professor of the School of Architecture and Planning at MIT. Art history is the topic she is specializing in. The third speaker will be Nakamura Keiko-san. She is the Honorary Director of the JT Biohistory Research Hall. She has published many books. I'm sure you have seen and read some of the doctor's books. Now we would like to allocate 15 minutes each for these speakers. We would like to also ask the audience to send your comments on your screen to the right. There is a Slido function. From there, you can write in your comments and send them to us. Please share your comments, how you feel, and what is your impression about the presentations. So without further ado, we would like to start with the Watanabe-san. Watanabe-san is engaged in joint research with myself, and more recently we have co-authored a book together. It was regarding sports. It is called Mienai Sports Zukan. Without vision, sports can be conveyed. That was the message of this book. Junji-san, please.
Thank you. I'm Watanabe. Ito-san, thank you very much for your kind introduction. I'm Junji Watanabe from NTT. My area of expertise is haptics and information well-being. Under COVID-19, you cannot get in touch with others, and the way you communicate is changing. And well-being, there are now movements on trying to rethink your own well-being. So this is related to my research, and we have to think deeply about it now. And I myself am researching haptics. What is different between haptics and other senses compared to vision, hearing senses? Vision, hearing senses are ways to recognize things that are far away, but haptics is a near sense to confirm the existence of objects and also evokes emotional responses. So, in terms of technology and sense, and to create a new experience, this is what I have been studying so far. So I'd like to give you some ideas about it. The first point, this is Heartbeat Picnic. The name may sound strange. There's a white box and a stethoscope, and if you put on your chest, the information from the stethoscope is sent to the box, and this box synchronizes with my heartbeat, and not by sound, but you can feel with your haptics, your heartbeat. I can feel by myself that I'm quite nervous now. So you can feel your heartbeat on your hand. I do this type of workshops, and children can experience this to feel their own lives by their hands. So what is life? We talk about understanding and empathy, but not to understand by your brain, but to feel it with your own hands. This is what is possible using this device. And furthermore, the heart is not something that you can control by yourself. You have a strong heartbeat. When you're nervous, your heartbeat gets faster, and you can feel that by your hand. So I can understand by myself that I'm very tense and nervous. I can understand my emotion by myself, and not only by myself alone, but my friend or person neighboring can feel my heartbeat. In a show I gave this, you don't know who is her. Actually, she's my mother. So ever since I was born, I think when I was a child, we get close and we touch each other. But when you get older, you don't have so many opportunities. So I use this device to show her that I was able to live thus far. And for me, this was a very important experience. Within a family, of course, you know that your family member is alive, but to experience that by yourself and understand by yourself, you can do that by using this device. And as you can see on this photograph, people who are meeting each other for the first time, instead of exchanging business cards, you're exchanging your heartbeat to say hello to someone who you are meeting for the first time. Then, by exchanging your heartbeat, you give to someone else what is important to you, and by exchanging your heartbeat, the human relationship may get smoother. And the picture on the top right, something that looks like an animal, well, actually, there is a person inside, but something, you can feel that something is actually existing. And the bottom right, there was a exhibition fermentation, and that person was making this where air causes bubbles for fermentation, but you can feel on your hand that phenomena using the stethoscope. And recently, not only exchanging the heart, but I'm also working on communicating far away using haptics. For instance, haptically shared space of intimacy. The right-hand side photograph is in Hatsudai Shinjuku Intercommunication Center, or ICC. Here there's a table, and it's just a device where you can see a person far away, and the WICOM Yamaguchi Information Center also has the same device. So the haptics of the table can be felt in the two places. If you beat the table at ICC, WICOM can also feel that you are beating the table. Let me show you a video. In each place, there's a person coming, and you would not usually get in touch with others so close. But through this video image, you can feel as if you are very close to each other. You can maintain the close contact between each other through this table. If someone beats the table, the other person on the other side can feel that. And you don't even have to wash your hand. Or also, if you write something with a pencil, just like you are touching a paper or use a roller, you can communicate that haptics to the other person. And what is interesting is that between these two persons, they start to have ideas of new games. It was not possible to communicate so close to each other, but between these two persons, a new game or a new rule that let us do this when this happens. A sort of rule is born between the two. So by sharing the table in front, which was a relationship that did not exist so far, leads to new ways of enjoying, just drawing or making quizzes, or to make a box garden with each other. Through haptics, a new way of communication is born. So, what are you doing here? When I think about it, this is a book written by Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow, saying that there are two systems in your brain. One is a fast system. this is subconscious and an embodied system, and another is a slow system where attention is allocated and is conscious and linguistic. So when you manage your language, we usually use the slow system. But to hand over the heartbeat and share the haptics of a table, a system that's different from language system is used. Even if the person is not actually in front of you, this leads to the creation of a new relationship. So under COVID-19, you cannot get in touch with each other directly. So how to create a new close relationship under the current situation. I have given you some examples of realizing a close relationship. So I think I'm running out of time, but another thing I wanted to tell today is, where is the boundary of the self? The boundary of the self. How much am I moving by myself? And quite a long time ago, nearly 13 years ago, I did an experiment which I wanted to show you, so I'd like to show you the video. The title is Save Yourself.
A novel sensation interface device.
Here, in the back of your ear, electrodes were attached. A very weak electric current is given, and then the person starts to move. In the medical sector, such functional tests were made already. If a person is walking, you can say that the people cannot walk straight and is moving to a different direction that a person was aiming for. And about this experiment, from a scientific perspective, what is interesting is that regardless of your will, your body moves to a different direction. And then I am moving my body, I'm controlling my body. You lose that sense that you are controlling your own self. And this experiment is that the device to give electric current comes from a doll. A signal comes from a doll through in your water. This is a little tricky. So this person's sense seems to be given out. So I don't know if it is right to make this kind of experiment or not, but this is dangerous. You should not try to do this. And as I have said before, to use electric current on a human body, it is not dangerous, but this is not something that you would usually do. And by doing so, am I moving by myself or I'm made to move? That becomes very vague. And what is important is not that you're handing over the electric current to the person, because if you do so, you are controlling the other person. But instead of doing that, you are moving by yourself and also you are being moved. And how to explain this sensation? I was always wondering about it. But recently, one thing that I referred to, one idea, a philosophy that I was referring to, Professor Deguchi of Kyoto University, who is a philosopher, said that he used the concept self as we. And this may be an explanation to explain this phenomena. What he's saying I'm not in a position to explain what he is saying, but let me briefly try to explain my understanding. In the conventional view of myself, I control my own body, and I can also control other tools. And so this I is the self, is myself. And what Professor Deguchi was saying is that not only myself on the right-hand side, but the body and the tools, everything together is the self. That is his concept. And the self entrusts to me. So this is a concept. This may be not sufficient to explain, but let me give you a different example. Let us say that I am the coach of a team, and the coach gives orders and controls the movement of the players. That is a conventional way of a coach of a team. But if you think that we equals self, the coach and the players, the athletes, there are many people, there is a whole, and the coach is also being trusted to give instructions. So it's not that we are living, but we are entrusted to live. That is a different perspective. And from this perspective, I'm doing a joint research with a professor to think of ways of measuring this concept. And I'm using 2 circles as a measure. What this means is that one small circle is I, and the big circle is we, which means the whole. And top left is when I and we are separated, an individual relationship, and the top right is where I am included in the we. And when it goes upwards, the connection is stronger. So the tie is stronger, so I may become a tool of a whole. But going down the chart, the tie is weak, so my autonomy is maintained, and I'm functioning as one of the we. So I'm not saying which is better, but the sense of self could be reconsidered from this perspective. And the last part, so how broad is the whole? Not only about myself, but there are friends, there's a family, there's a society, there's a universe, including nature. What is the boundary of we? Maybe this is an opportunity to reconsider the boundary of we. So what I've been saying so far is about the bodily sensations. To feel in a new method, I have developed devices for that purpose, and also to think of a sense of a self. That is what I meant. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Junji-san. That was very interesting. And next, we'd like to move on to the second speaker. Second speaker is Professor Caroline Jones from the School of Architecture and Planning of MIT. With Caroline, when I went to MIT last year, I had the opportunity she was the professor supporting me, and exhibition was being planned at that time. And this was very much related to today's topic of symbiosis. And virus was also mentioned in the exhibition. And 6 months later, I never would have imagined that we would be in the pandemic globally. It was so timely. So I'm just so interested to know what Caroline is thinking about today under this pandemic. So Caroline, over to you.
Thank you so very much. I'm very, very happy to be here to talk about one of my favorite topics in the whole world. So I'm trying to maximize. There we go. On the subject of viruses, I will simply say that I did publish a piece in Art Forum which directly touched on the role that viruses have played in evolution, including making mammals possible. So I hope that might be of interest to some in the audience. So the question that Ito-san has posed for us I am addressing as who lives with us. This is inevitably a cosmic question. Biologists capture a powerful framing of this question in the word symbiosis, which refers to the fact that life is found with other life. Whether adjacent, incorporated, codependent, or parasitic, we find symbiosis almost everywhere on our planet. From the smallest cell to the planetary biosphere, life is not comprised of individuals. Rather, we are entangled entities at every scale. Let me shift to two other precise and simple diagrams of worlds. On the left is a visualization of German-speaking philosopher Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz and his theory of the self as monad, described in the 1714 monadology and rendered diagrammatically by the French postmodern philosopher Gilles Deleuze in 1988. Leibniz's Western self senses the world only dimly by extruding itself from a shared essence and returning to a central substance that Leibniz surely figured as divine. On the right is a 1903 sketch by the visionary Meiji polymath Minakata Kumagusu, an ecologist and botanist who was corresponding with Shingon Buddhist monk Toki Horyu at the time. Perhaps you know this famous drawing very well. I learned of it from contemporary artist Yena Sutala, about whom I will have more to say in a moment. What I want to do in this brief set of comments is to celebrate the contrast between Leibniz's view of the individual and Minakata's theory of our entanglement in the universe. The juxtaposition of Eastern and Western philosophies is a bit of a tired formula. The comparison goes back centuries, staged by Leibniz himself, who devoted a lengthy essay to Chinese philosophy just before he wrote the Monadology. In fact, this is his own personal annotated copy of the I Ching. To track where Leibniz's train of thought goes in the West, we need to connect with Martin Heidegger's laborious work with philosopher Paul Hsiao. After the war, Heidegger's Nazism rejected, he healed himself by working with Hsiao to translate the Tao Te Ching into German. Updating the search for a bridge between Eastern and Western philosophies is Hong Kong media theorist Ye Kui, writing in English in his 2016 book, The Question Concerning Technology in China. My audience in Tokyo will want to note the slightly problematic move of claiming Nishitani, for example, for a book asking how Chinese thought might contribute to a renewed questioning of globalized techniques. I want to take these questions in a new direction. I want to dissolve the recurring comparison of East and West through a third term taken from biology and deeply entangled in the facts of symbiosis. The bridge that I want to use to link these historical worldviews is the scientific term Mycetes. The suffix Mycetes already indicates the fungus kingdom, effective collaborators in millions of years of life in the world that Leibniz was trying to understand. Minakata, in turn, knew that his mandala was inspired by these hard-to-define critters. Familiar to Minakata from the mushroom, fungi were thought in his time to include the slime molds. So these were thought to have been fungus at the time Minakata was doing his biology. In fact, the slimy and fruiting life forms that Minakata was most famously studying at the time of his mandala, the acellular slime molds or plasmodia, it has now been decided are not fungus at all. As beautifully articulated in a monograph by Tsurumi Kazuko, who carefully copied drawings from Minakata's own notebooks, the biologist was tracking the life stages of one type of acellular slime mold in these drawings, and he correctly parsed how these amoebal entities creep together to form a plant-like fruiting body. Moreover, he celebrated how these essential creatures on the forest floor put human arrogance to shame. We now know, quote, the plasmodium, which men look down upon as a despicable, phlegm-like object, has nonetheless successfully found a niche in ecosystems all over the planet. Tsurumi convinces me that Minakata's observations of the mysterious plasmodia directly inspired his mandala as method, which addresses what scientists and humans can possibly know and what they cannot. Those able to read the Japanese in Minakata's drawing can parse its unique cosmology to explore how scientific wonders interfaced with Buddhist notions of en and in. One, the indirect, exterior, potentially random cause for life in things such as rain and sun. The other, those types of direct interior causes of life, such as the seed that directly causes the plant. I understand that Japanese has a word in-en that brings en and in together, allowing Minakata to think in supple ways about the conduits between and connecting the causes of life. The Myxomacetus that so inspired Minakata are now understood to be fungus-like organisms located within the diverse kingdom Protista. This is still a grab bag category in biology, meaning simply all nucleated cellular organisms that are not animals, plants, or fungi. Here shown are amoebas, foraminifera, heliozoans, radiolarans, flagellates, and ciliates. There are so many kinds of protista and slime molds that Minakata loved. In addition to the stalk-forming cellular dictyostelids, he loved the many-headed creepers, such as these acellular physarum types. Likely, these creepers were the first of the eukaryotes to colonize land. They are also called mycetozoa, the zoa addition suggesting how such fungus-like entities are closer to animals in our own minds. In paying homage to Minakata, my artistic guide Yena Sutala works with the slime mold Polycephalum physarum in her sculpture Hierarchy to Holarchy, in training the creepers to navigate a Minakata mandala. This helps me get back to my framing question: who lives with us? The grammar of this question in English is underdetermined. It can mean, who is it that lives unseen in our basements? Or, who is it that lives in and on our bodies as necessary symbionts? Or finally, who lives as archaeological evidence in our cells, contributors to our evolution as the tragically dominant species we are today? Sutala is originally from Finland, coming to the Minakata mandala as if going over the North Pole. She sees in Minakata's diagram not a universal cosmic holism, but a depiction of the very limits of human understanding. By working with the social amoebae, as Minakata did, she too intends to inspire us to shift our thinking from individualism to the with-living characteristic of Terran life. Having studied Minakata's mandala closely in his Japanese research center, she understands how he searched the patterns of slime mold life to contribute to a biology that was also a philosophy and a theory of the cosmos. Even those fluent in Japanese scan Minakata's astonishing sketch and its accompanying letter with some difficulty. Anthropologists Casper Brun Jensen, Miho Ishii, and Philip Swift read his letter this way: conceptualizing the combined set of worldly phenomena in the shape of a mandala, encompassed by the great mystery, Daifushigi, of Dainichi no Yorai, Minakata distinguished between wonders, belonging to what can be roughly translated as abstract things, koto, concrete things, mano, the mind, kokoro, and reason, kotowari. Scholar Gerald Figal brings this thinking further into focus in its historical period by comparing Minakata's mandala to the diagrams of his close associate, Inoue Enryo, who hoped to banish all forms of non-rational thought in his modernization of Japanese belief systems. How tidy and almost Christian are Inoue's tidy trinities, far from Minakata's vortex of mysteries. This embrace of the mysteries of symbiotic existence is exactly what drew Sutala to Minakata, his acknowledgement of what we do not know and what is not given to us to understand. But that was not to stop in the empirical search for knowledge. A collector of specimens his entire life, Minakata noted tastes, smells, textures, and colors in his notebooks. As with this macroalgae from Cuba, Minakata used every sense he had in mapping the world that protists, mycetes, and eukaryotes had built together. I conclude by addressing this multisensory way of knowing. Sutala's camera certainly privileges sight in her documentation of her work with slime mold, but her book about them, Orgs, moves into the realm of touch and the haptics that we heard about earlier, offering a raised pattern evocative of the social amoebae and their creeping ways. Senses move fluidly across the vibratory membranes we call the self, and may even call upon our evolutionary symbionts to do so. Take the sense of smell. The Norwegian-born artist Sissel Tolaas works with smell and even attempts to assemble a new vocabulary for this sense, which she calls nasalo. But until we are fluent in her new words, which indeed seem rather Nordic to me, we will mostly use analogies. This rock smells like the sea. This other rock smells like soil. I fantasize that Japanese smell words must work better. In English, even the verb construction, I smell, is completely unclear. Does it mean I actively take in molecular information? Or does it mean the person next to me has to deal with my emanations? Am I smelly to other people, or am I smelling? This amusing photo of Sissel Tolaas helps with my most radical claim. This primordial chemical sensing of others' molecules, this thing of smell, is a sensing of our symbionts. The scent of a beloved partner is given off by their companionate skin bacteria, interacting with their immune systems and particular microbiome. Out in the world, the smell of dry earth just after rain is so specific it has the name petrichor, a combination of the chemical called geosmin, which is a metabolite of various actinomycetes and fungi, with fatty acids from plants that are subject to those symbionts. When we identify smells like these, it is because the actual molecular structure of their combined chemicals is meeting a specifically calibrated receptor in our own nasal cilia, passing it on to one of our 388 olfactory neurons in the brain. The sorting starts with the cilia, tiny hair-like cells that are found throughout our sensory system. In the nose, they lock onto a molecule and seem to bring memory immediately into play. Where did these cells come from? The pioneering biologist Lynn Margulis offered a bold theory in the 1990s, building on her core 1967 argument about endosymbiosis, the idea that our cells evolved from ancient mergings with single-celled bacteria. In her update of the earlier endosymbiotic theory, Margulis argued that all of our human senses evolved by incorporating the wriggling parts of spirochete bacteria. These wrigglers, as she called them, became the sensory cilia of our tongues, our nasal linings, our auditory, and our retinal cells. Margulis's reframing of our evolutionary sensory symbionts is very radical and still unaccepted by scientists. According to Margulis's enchanting but highly contested theory, the undulating cilia structures in our sensory cells are resonating with their molecular cousins in the world. Symbionts, long since resorbed into our bodies, but still intraactive with bacteria and fungus in the world. In other words, our entire sensing apparatus records a history of symbiosis with ancient others, incorporated to form the blooming, buzzing world taken in to give us the harmonic illusion of a human self. Margulis's first radical theory on endosymbiosis has now been accepted. For artistic purposes, I have here imagined our senses as correspondingly indebted to ancient cellular collaborations, a necessary destabilizing of the individual, akin to what the multicellular slime molds demonstrated to both Minakata and Sutella. Like the collaborating cells of the social amoebae, Minakata, Sutella, and philosopher Donna Haraway all collaborate in proclaiming a unified idea. To become a one, you must be a many. Thank you.
Hi, Caroline さん、どうもありがとうございます。
Thank you, Caroline. Thank you for your very interesting presentation. Now we'd like to move on to the third speaker. The third speaker is Dr. Nakamura Keiko, Honorary Director of JT Biohistory Research Hall. I myself am now doing art-related research, but I'm actually from biology. But during my studies, I shifted to study of art. But I felt something awkward about bioscience, and I think that Dr. Nakamura's theory gave me a lot of hints. Now, Dr. Nakamura, please. Thank you for introduction. First, there's one thing I have to mention at first. I was thinking of making an English version of the slides, but I'm sorry I've sent you only the Japanese version. I have to apologize for that. The slides are only in Japanese. As Ito-san said, I study biology or biohistory. And what I'm thinking about is very simple. People say that with COVID-19, people have changed, but I have never changed during the last 50 years, and I will not change. Humans are living beings, is a part of nature. So I think that will remain unchanged. I'm sorry, can you see my slides? Okay. No, I cannot see the slides. Please click the share button. Yes, I clicked the share button. So please share the screen and choose the slides that you want to show. Now can you see? No? I'm seeing it on my screen, but maybe we can show the slides from here. So please wait for a few minutes. Yes, I clicked the share button. Or maybe I can use my PC. So please tell me when you want to change the page. I will use my PC. Oh, sorry. Yes, we have the fan-shaped slide. This is the basics. So this shows at the top that there is a diversity of living beings. So there are so many diverse living beings, as you all know. So this is very diverse. But as according to biology, we all know that all living beings are made of cells and they all have DNAs. In the current biology, the pivot of the fan 3.8 billion ago, the cell of our ancestors existed and everything has evolved from there. So it is very diverse, but in principle, we are all the same. So these are basics of all living beings. And when we share, we tend to share centered on humans. But as you can see, from the pivot to all living beings, the length is the same. Everything started 3.8 billion years ago. There is no difference between higher forms of life and lower forms of life. We are all at the same level. That's the third point I wanted to say. And number 4 is that humans belong here. So this is natural. The current day society of humans is outside this fan. Though it is diverse, humans are looking at this diversity from outside. So to have empathy, to understand each other, so we have to go inside. This is very clear and obvious. So next slide, please. So the problem now is COVID-19. And in this picture, there is no virus, because viruses are not living beings. So what are viruses? Actually, viruses are moving genes, as Ito-san said. When we say genes, we have a very fixed idea about genes, human genes or my gene. So that is not right. All living beings share. Because we share, we have to understand each other. We all share with each other. And viruses move around. Genes are always moving in the cells and in the chromosomes. So genes want to move. So the next slide. And when we say genes, our genes, as you know, has a double helix. That is all that we have. But virus genes have only one helix, and also some have two, or some are called RNA, which works by getting information from DNA. And they are single and double helix. So what this means, as I have shown before, at the pivot of the fan, that is where we start. That is the start of the world of DNA. And before that, there is an RNA world. There used to be an RNA world. That is where living beings started. We started to find that out. So virus includes that world. So even the situation before we existed, virus existed. So that is the existence of virus. So that's not something that we can fight against and eliminate. Well, we say with COVID coexistence, that may be too gentle, but viruses are things that already exist. So all we can do is to live together with the virus, to coexist. That is our relationship with virus. They existed before humans. So we are living beings. So what is our usual way of thinking? We should not think as a dichotomy, but it is diverse. Everything must be considered together. Things must be diverse and universal. And throughout a long history, there's a relationship, and also the whole and the parts are entangled, and also the layers entangled. And one thing I wanted to talk a lot, though I don't have time, is that within living beings, there are contradictions and things that are rational. In the current day society, we tend to be too logic and rational, but contradiction and rationality are entangled, are interrelated. That is what are living beings. So this is a way we should live. And the next slide here, as you can see, how should we live? When we think about it, there are many ways of living. I have written 4 ways of living. A great medical scientist, Kakitani Sensei, talked about it. One is that you must live earnestly. It is very hard to live. You must do your best to live, to eat, to live, and you must also have children, bacteria, and all living beings are doing the same. So, when we keep living like that, also, with the environment, you must live skillfully. And next, to have empathy or symbiosis, which might be related, is that in the nature, living beings living in the nature, you must live knowingly. In a sense, you must know how you should live. And within one living being, including bacteria, for bacteria, I think they live they live earnestly, but when things get more complicated, there are different ways of living. But in the case of humans, what is important is to live well. So, by understanding each other, when you think about it, what is to live well? This becomes important. And next, so, of course, humans are living beings. In the current day society, the pink area, science and technology, leads to the development, and financial capitalism moves money. Only in this world we are living, especially in the last 300 years. That is the world that we made. And what I'm saying is that, of course, that is one way of living as humans. But behind that, there are humans in nature. And to live thinking of a whole is the way we must live. So if you live only within the pink area, then you may destroy nature. And now we have a big problem of a global environmental issue, but the major problem is that we ourselves are nature. So if you destroy the nature, you're destroying your inner nature. You're destroying your own body and mind. And mind means time and relationship. Under COVID-19, we are facing a lot of problems. So time and relationship is being destroyed, which makes us hard to live. When you live as living beings, this is extremely important. And nature envelopes us. So there are natural disasters like earthquakes or virus may be very toxic. It may be pathogenic, but in science and technology, let us say there is a nuclear power plant which is attacked by an earthquake, then the destruction gets bigger. So from the very beginning, to live thinking of a whole. That is the basics of the way of living. The next page. Now, to summarize, after the 17th century, during the last 300 years, we lived in a world based on mechanical theory. Nature was also modeled and conquered and controlled. With reason and structure and function, you can understand everything. You must just advance, and then you can pursue your studies. But as I have mentioned, rather than changing the world because of COVID-19, it is clear that in the 21st years, this is an era that we must have a life theory-based concept to enter into the nature by ourselves and live as a humans within the nature. So that is a shift from bioscience to biohistory. There was a presentation about the haptics, but to have reasoning and also to learn and acquire. And what is important is time and relationship. And that leads to evolution. And now going forward, I believe that in our studies, we will have to be more narrative and storytelling in conducting our studies. So what else I've mentioned so far is that genomes with information and to be individuals and also to be the whole and to be individuals, and all living beings have genomes. So this must encompass the whole. We're able to understand that through our studies. So based on that, from the world of matter to the world of living beings, other visual senses and tactile senses, there are other senses, and also with matter, there are small molecules which will influence, and there are hormones. So understand the overall picture with that, and I think this is the basics that we have to understand. And also in case of humans, humans have language. And genomes and language, in a sense, I think have the same meaning. And thinking of a whole, also living beings end here and they live here. But in case of humans, in the mechanical theory world, we think only to this stage, but we start from here and we are linked to here. So haptics or other words that were mentioned before are included here. And next page. And actually, in case of the view of a world based on mechanical theory is a predictable world based on logics and based on statistics and probability. That is what we have been doing so far. But with this, it is difficult to create a world which we can have empathy and live together. Francois Jacob from the Pastoral Institute expressed very well what are living organs. Living beings are unpredictable and it's made of bricolage as a patchwork. It's not logic. It's more accidental. So, as living beings, to live as living beings means to incorporate all this. However, under such a situation, in the world of genomes, linked with living beings, and humans have languages. So we have a new world which are connected. And there's something common as basics but to look at the whole. By doing so, human beings can live as human beings and live well. So ability owned only by humans is imagination, the power of imagination. And by having the power of imagination, then starting from there internally, that is put into language. And what we can do then is creativity. And in this way, we can create a new world, to see something that is invisible and to think, in particular, to think about the future. This is what can be used in living well. So we already talked about biology, so coexistence with machines, I think, will be discussed in a different session. So I will be brief on this page. As I have mentioned, humans, living beings, and language. Looking at the general picture, then relationship with the world of machines, in particular with artificial intelligence, is something that may come. So to make use of this, I think, is the way we should live in the 21st century. And the basics of this concept, first I introduced the life history fan-shaped picture. And another point is a biohistory mandala, the same as the mandala shown before. Mandalas, when we think of a general picture, is a very easy way of understanding. There is in the center, many living beings and many organs are made from the center. This shows the layers. And the first point I mentioned, for the first living being, there is evolution to diverse living beings. And as Dr. Jones mentioned, the concept of mandala, and also she mentioned about innen. This is not something that we can explain, limited only on logic or statistics. In the Eastern world, there's a concept of mandala. In thinking of how to live in the future, this is a concept that will help deepening our way of thinking. So in mandalas, what this means is space and plurality, and that there is a center but expands to the whole, and the whole is in harmony. And another point I think is important is that the flow is very dynamic, and also there is an alternation. For instance, Dainichi Nyorai is the center of a mandala, but can be changed to anything, and also there's a wholeness. In this world of living beings. And then, based on Dainichi Nyorai, within the culture, from a historical perspective, the world of mandalas, as was introduced before, in the same way, in the future, I think this concept exists as a basics for us to think about how to live in the future. So this is what I wanted to communicate today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Thank you very much. We have spanned over hundreds of millions of years. So I think I definition will now differ. So even the aroma or smell is not just breathing air. It's like I am also breathing the from what is emitted from Nanjo-san. So I understand better that senses as well as the definitions of the words we use was very heavy for me to take on in terms of all mind and body. Now, actually, we don't have much time in the discussion period. We only have 5 minutes, actually. But we would like to receive comments from each person. So I have the following specific questions regarding understanding each other in terms of body. Junji-san said that a play occurred spontaneously. Nakamura-san said that bricolage was mentioned. So it seems that in terms of interaction with the bodies, or in terms of interaction with the non-humans, do you have any specific insight that you would like to share? Inclusive of your impression of the other panelists' presentation. So let's go in that order. I would like to ask Watanabe-san to take this on.
Thank you. Then, rather than as a general perspective, I'd like to share my screen to talk about some other ways of thinking. In my case, I would like to mention what I have tried and which may trigger different thoughts. So I heard about the term living well. Then, as living beings or as a nature, this may be the same, but there are many areas unknown. And then, what we cannot understand, what is unknown, how can we accept and consider about it and give a feedback? And how to do this physically? I have been thinking about it, and this is a case study. In my case, I use haptics to see how much you can communicate with others. And I have a group doing this research. And I would like to introduce a workshop. And from that, maybe we can have an idea of how to live well or how to live with some rational. So please try to be compact. And what I mean, only about haptics to have an exchange with others. That is what I'm trying to do. What I mean is that there is an alien from a haptic planet on the screen. So the participants at a workshop wrote a haptic diary. And from here, we use the haptic to write a letter to respond. So how much you can accept others, though you're using a language, how can you give a feedback? So it is very important to practice this, and I was having this workshop with children. So even with a language, I talked about a meta-language. And to do this physically, I think is important. And that is what I'm doing.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask Caroline-san, do you have any message or comment to the other panelists? Having listened to them, what's your take?
Question of the non-human or the more than human is there in every talk, and I think it's a wonderful thread. So the question of what we take in from the world in an ancient sense, evolutionarily, could be linked quite interestingly to Watanabe's research of what we take in immediate terms from haptic signals or whatever. So I love the biohistory that was presented. That was so interesting. I think that our challenge as a species right now is indeed to understand that we are not like plants. We cannot make our food from solar energy and water. We are completely dependent for our existence on the thriving of other life. So we are heterotrophs, and we take in energy that is produced by other creatures. And to imagine that we are individuals unconnected from this web of life is a big problem. So I think the question of the more than human, it's complicated because our language is organized to separate us, at least in English. You know, the human is organized as a separate entity. So I wish we could come up with another word for how we are entangled haptically, how we are entangled symbiotically with other life. And, you know, and people are trying, but it's so difficult because language is such an important tool for us, but language always packages and separates. So part of what I love about Minakata is, you know, he loved these creatures that are just really hard to delimit. They're one cell for part of their life, and then they get together to form these fruiting stalks, and then there's spores, you know, which seem to be dead, but they're actually waiting for the right conditions to grow again. So the fact that he embraced these seemingly impossible forms of life, I think, is a great model for us, and we need to do that work.
はい、キャロラインさんどうもありがとうございます。
Thank you, Caroline. Then, Dr. Nakamura, we have also received questions from the viewers. You said about the importance of time and relationship. That was the key point. Could you explain a little more about it? Yes. For instance, in the area of psychology, when you ask what is a mind, it's different. I'm talking from perspective of biological history. And my perspective is that this is strongly related to your mind. For example, when you think of time, the Chinese characters meaning busy is that you lose your mind. So ancient people knew that you will lose your mind when you're too busy. So with COVID, now we cannot get in touch with others, you cannot relate to others. So you tend to be depressed. And I really feel that. So in the area of biohistory, time and relation is the basics, is the substance. And I think that our minds were born from that. So I don't say that minds are related to time and relationship. That's not what I mean. But time and relationship supports our mind. That is what I meant. And Dr. Jones, you used the word innen, which was very impressive. The word en means relationship. In the Orient, when you say en, in studying in biology, there are cells, things start from cells, but depending on where the cell arrives, that decides what that living being becomes. And that is decided through en. So this is something that happens daily. But Western society, who are more rational, using the word inning, this sounds very illogical and non-scientific, but I was surprised to hear the word inning from you. So the whole world now, well, I think that human beings are all the same, came from the same source. So we must be able to understand each other, not to separate United States or Japan. But basically, I think that we can think in the same manner. That's what I felt from what you have mentioned through that word.
Thank you very much, Nakamura-san. It seems that when we consider life, 1 hour and 50 minutes is definitely not enough time. So it seems like a session should continue further, but we will have a follow-up session later for those of you who have registered. So please go to the My page and access the URL for the follow-up session, and you can join us for the discussion after the session as well. I'm sorry that we've run out of time in the session, but this will be the end of the formal part of this breakout session. Thank you very much to the panelists. Thank you. Thank you very much for your participation. And you have talked about coexisting with others. That has been the common theme. I think there was a